Live from the Washington, D.C. area, all empowered citizens need to know about intelligent use of resources, smart governance, inclusive communities, smart industry, and healthy, thriving urbanization. This is Smart Sustainability, the TV talk about shaping a sustainable future in the digital age with Nicolette de Vidar. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Nicolette de Vidar. Change is healing. That's probably not something you hear every day because change, first and foremost, is unsettling. You can't go back to your old life and you have no idea what's to come next. But if we're honestly making sense of what's happening in our lives and the world right now, we can't really overlook how healing change is. You may be struggling with it, in fact, most of us do, but think about it. What did you uncover about your own life in the past 3 months alone that for years you hadn't even thought about? When you're suddenly spending all the time with your partner and the kids in the same room, being cooped up, seeing yourself on Zoom all day, being confronted with what you dislike about your looks, or juggling homeschooling with kids with the demands of your boss. Oh, it stirs up feelings, let's be real. Most of us are being stretched. In all this madness, though, there may be a sense of meaning. For the first time in decades, running away from ourselves is just no longer an option. You're meeting the real you, with all its wounds, hurts, thoughts, beliefs, the once in life and the not-so-once. As long as we were treading on the hamster wheel, we didn't see that because we've been so busy with everything except ourselves. Ironically, ourself is the key to the future. With no more escape, we're forced to look at our own story, unfiltered. The things you lied about to yourself, the things you buried, the things you never wanted to face and thought you had left long behind you, all popping up in front of your inner eye. Bottom line, there's no forward until we clean up our past and love it. No more pushing under the rug, no more holding back, and no more being unauthentic. The 21st century is about the real you. So with all the baggage bottled up inside of us bubbling to the surface, how do we deal with illusions and triggers of the past? How can we heal the present to build a strong tomorrow? My first guest tonight is a community mediator who focuses on conflict resolution in families, interracial conflict, and community conflicts in general. My second guest is an Army veteran turned yoga teacher who specializes on using yoga to deal with trauma. Please welcome Omar Battle and Kyra Davenport. I'm going to start with you on this first one. What's a community mediator?
Firstly, a mediator is a third party that intervenes between two or more people or multiple parties who are having a dispute. A mediator is a third party that is not judgmental. The mediator does not make decisions for anyone. The mediator does not create solutions for anyone. Mm-hmm. Usually, mediation is referred to people through the courts. A community mediator is someone who offers their services to the entire community. So it doesn't matter what the conflict is, whether it is workplace, relationship, neighbor, it doesn't matter. A community mediator services the community.
So when you said it focuses on disputes, dispute sounds to me like very escalated last level, but that's not really what I'm hearing. This sounds more like it's a conflict resolution that could come in at an earlier stage.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
That's what I thought. So how did you get into this?
So I had always had an interest in learning about why conflict happens. How do people deal with the aftermath of conflict? I first went to George Mason University, graduated with a master's in peace operations, and that's where my journey began. Later, I discovered Community Mediation of Maryland and became a volunteer mediator. And from there, I really developed a love for the conflict resolution profession.
So is the passion in you coming from the end result, the conflict resolution, or is the passion in you more like because you like to help people coming to peace with each other?
So the passion for me comes with the desire to make a difference in society, make a positive impact on people's lives through resolving conflict.
Okay, hold that thought because I do want to dive deeper into how we can actually impact society with that. But I want to switch to Kyra here for a second. Can you hear us, first of all?
Yes, I can hear you guys just
I don't
fine.
think Kyra can hear us. Doesn't look like. Anyway, so I'm going to ask you for a second. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
No. I think we have technical problems, so I'm going to go back to Omar here for a second. Oh, you can hear us?
Yes.
Okay. So you made quite a journey yourself, Kyra, from an Army veteran to becoming a yoga teacher and then launching your own initiative. How did you have a light bulb coming on, like in between professions, that suddenly said, I want to do something else?
Yes, starting my own yoga collective was something that I really wanted to do. When I was working on as a communications manager, I had a attack. And it was just so terrifying to me. And one of the chief chapter officer told me, well, why don't you try yoga? And when I tried yoga and realized all my control, I just felt like the mother love. So I felt like that I really wanted to share with people. So I went up career communication, California, doing yoga, and I shouldn't about it, but I wasn't living and breathing. So COVID-19 around and they stay at home, I was able to take a deeper dive, and this was my chance to really start a collective. So I would take advantage of it and be a servant.
Mm-hmm. But so that from yoga teacher to launching, what's it called? Collective Yoga Reset. That's still quite another leap, right? Let's talk about your Yoga Collective Reset. What is that?
So Reset Yoga Collective is an exciting online yoga community that started. I believe in inclusive yoga for everyone. So part of Reset Yoga Collective is to foster a judgment zone and a space for the Black, Indigenous, and people of color for them to start their journey and deepen their practice. I offer private yoga, meditation practices, techniques, and forum, and all those things.
So what are you aiming to solve with that initiative?
What I'm aiming to is to bring that message through that yoga is everyone. Yoga is inclusive. Yoga is exactly what it is for people of color, and we should feel confident in any yoga.
I'm going to come back to you. When we spoke about mediation, for whom it is, we spoke about community mediation in general. What are some of the areas where mediation nowadays, or conflict resolution nowadays, can be applied to? What does it solve?
So conflict resolution, like I said, can solve many disputes. It could be workplace, neighbor, it could be relationship. If there's an instance where somebody feels like they're being discriminated in the workplace, perhaps because of their boss, then if their boss and that person who feels discriminated wants to bring their case to mediation to resolve it civilly, they can.
But you said if they want to bring their case to mediation, so there has to be already an open case for it. So this cannot be just something that you say, you have issues with that in the workplace, for example, and you can say, well, let's bring in a third party to just act as a mediator. So that's more like the formal stage. It's not a facilitator role. Or is there a level that's below that can say we go to a community mediator who can come in as a facilitator first before we escalate this to an actual case?
So correct. If both people agree to take their case to mediation, they can contact an independent mediator, such as myself, or they could refer that case to their community mediation center.
That's interesting. And in the last 3 months, did you see an uptake of cases?
So I have not seen an uptick in cases, but personally, I believe that that's because there aren't a lot of people who are aware that these services exist.
Yeah, because I think most people think about mediation or conflict resolution as something like you have to have a case in court pending, or it has to be escalated to that level, and then you take the mediation route.
Correct.
But that's not the case. So if you have, for example, and that's also for our viewers, so I guess it sounds to me, if you have a dispute with your neighbor, or if you have a dispute as a business owner who now may be in trouble of having to renegotiate, for example, a lease for their business or something, could you utilize the service of a community mediator?
That's correct. You can utilize the services of a community mediator. Again, it doesn't matter what the conflict is. It could be a simple conflict between your neighbor. It could be a conflict between husband and wife. Community mediation is open for anyone.
Okay, so now I spoke at the intro about the time where we have more and more people sitting at home, being cooped up, with their partners, with the kids, homeschooling, multitasking. So obviously, conflict is rising. We know for a fact that domestic violence statistics are rising because of the COVID shutdown. People are being more home and things like that. Have you seen an uptake on this lately? So did people reach out and say, we're at a point where we need to talk to a mediator to just square out how our day-to-day life goes?
Yes, I have definitely seen that as well. Again, it could be a conflict going on between the parent and their child. Again, husband and wife. And I have seen cases where this conflict at home is just escalating out of control, and the people, they just need help.
So do they normally go to a psychologist first or to a therapist first, and then the therapist is usually the one who says, well, you have to go to a mediator because we're kind of butting heads, so to speak, there's no way to go? Or have you noticed cases where people would say, let's reach out to a mediator and get this squared away right away?
So mainly I've discovered cases where people just reach out to the mediator first. Perhaps someone made them aware that community mediation exists, or they became aware of community mediation through an outreach effort.
Okay, so how would people find you?
So as for me, people can contact me personally through my social media. I have an Instagram account. It would be Omar__battle.
So they would hire you directly?
Correct. They can contact someone such as myself directly, or they can look online for their local community mediation center.
Does every local community have a community mediation center?
Unfortunately, they don't. Maryland has community mediation. I believe Washington, D.C. has mediation services available, but not every state has community mediation. Maryland, as far as I know, is definitely at the forefront of community mediation.
So where would you go to find out if your community has a mediation center?
To discover if your community has a mediation center, I would suggest go online first and Google community mediation for your state.
For a certain town?
Yes.
State or town?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, when we spoke earlier, or you said earlier in the statement, you mentioned that you're doing this because you want to impact the community. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So when you say impact the community, what do you envision how conflict resolution is going to look like going forward?
So moving forward, I envision that conflict resolution will be available to multiple states. That's exactly how I would like to see conflict resolution proceed in the future.
That's the future? So is there going to be more involvement in the community? Do you think we're going to get to a point where people in the community know, well, rather than going to the court, my first approach would first be to reach out to a mediator and see if we can settle?
Yes. So in the future, that's something that I would definitely like to see happen. Instead of people resorting to fisticuffs, going to a judge, or constantly arguing, they realize that these services are available to resolve their conflict before escalating their solution to the level of a court.
Because unprecedented times, obviously, we live in unprecedented times. So unprecedented times require unprecedented solutions, and it sounds that this is one of them. Now, coming back to Kyra, the impact, what is the vision you have for your collective yoga reset? What impact is it going to have on the community? You mentioned it's mainly for people with color. How do you see it? How do you see the future of that initiative?
Sure. I see myself celebrating people of color, their yoga, their body, celebrating yoga practitioners, and them healing our community together. So part of that of Reset Yoga Collective is for us to heal together and pour back into our community.
Mm-hmm. Are you having regular classes right now?
Well, I do yoga sessions, have private clients, and I am taking private yoga. Absolutely.
And how long have you been going at this? It's fairly new, right?
Yeah, it is. So a few months now, yeah.
But when we spoke about at the beginning, you said it's mainly for people, a safety space for people with trauma experiences. So I want to go a little bit more into that, because we live at a time where we have really, literally, everything that's bubbled up inside us that happened in the past at some point, it's going to come up right now. And it doesn't just happen to a few people, actually, it happens to a lot of people, which I bet probably also for you at home. So if you're watching right now, I'm sure there's one or two things that come to mind where you say, yeah, that really kind of came up just like recently, that I thought about and that I just can't put aside, or I haven't really dealt with it properly. Because part of the change process that we're going in is that you can't push aside things anymore. They're just there. You have to deal with them as they come up. And if we talk about conflict resolution, there's two ways. So there's the inner conflict we're having, whatever the experience was. And then there is the external conflict resolutions, like where you would come into place, Omar, right? Where you would say, okay, we have to find a way of dealing with the actual dispute or the actual conflict or the different mindsets. So I want to get back to Kyra on this one. So first of all, do you think there's more and more people now that come to grips with some traumatic experiences that they've had in the past?
Oh, yeah. Everything that's in the world today is about anxiety, not being able to function normally in society, police brutality, all that stuff is compounding, and people start to have really bad anxiety and experience. And I never want to judge level of trauma. You know, my point is welcoming everyone to feel all trauma experiences.
We have some technical issues. I had a hard time understanding. Can you repeat, please, your last phrase, what you just said?
Oh, I was saying that I don't put a measurement on the trauma experiences that people have. My yoga welcomes all healing. So I put a measure where people's trauma may lie. I'm just ready to help you heal.
Why is yoga such a powerful method of healing past experiences?
I think the thing about yoga is that it connects you back to your essence, and it helps you heal from the inside out, from that mind and that stillness. And trauma sometimes aggravates deep meditation. And in most cases, you can take a step back, go slow, go back. It can be extremely delicate because what happens is the body's to being in that fight or flight mode, that panic mode, your body can almost be afraid to relax. So it's a delicate step process that I take as a yoga.
So is it like a way to reconnect with yourself?
Yes, it's a way to reconnect yourself, because when you experience trauma, there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
A huge disconnect. And sometimes when you experience trauma, you don't want to admit that it changed you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really hard feel for us to know you've experienced. So reconnect to your authenticity, your ethics, and the reality that you are loved. Your body not deserves your body deserves love, kindness, and soul.
Now, from your own experience, when you started out of this, did you notice that when you come from a traumatic space, for example, that it takes a while to open up and really loosen up and reconnect? What is the first impression? So when you get to a point and you start yoga and you calm your mind, I presume the first instinct is that a lot of these things just come up, right? Mm-hmm. And you learn to still your mind, but also move your body in a way. So is there a progress with that? Is there like a linear curve to some degree where you say, this is when I start out, I know it's going to be more difficult, I have to process it and learn it and work with that, and then you kind of open up also your body more physically so you can, stretch and move in different ways?
Yeah, so the thing about yoga that is rebuild your, the more when you develop good yoga practice, when you really own it, it becomes something that no one can take away from you. It's in your, it's a powerful elixir that you have. Like for instance, pranayama and a kapalabhati, all those, and step away to the bathroom, you're at work, collect yourself. It makes you so empowered. Now I have something using my body that I can use to calm down and feel confident and go through my day. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the thing, that focusing on allow to become a confident person again. With the trauma, it is a step process. I think for me, first learning to feel and get out of that fight or flight mode and that panic and anxiety. That's the first step, that meditation and connecting to the breath. Then we move the body, and we're moving into something really, really powerful when we get to the body too, because there becomes that confidence again and that self-love that I have to feel good. No matter what my thoughts might tell me, I deserve to feel good. No matter what my experiences have been, I deserve to feel good. And that's for everybody, the whole world, humanity. We all deserve to feel good about our body and feel safe.
How do you recognize when you're in fight or flight mode?
Ooh, I think the sound went out.
How?
Oops.
Flight mode.
Oh, there we go. Nicolette, can you repeat that? I'm sorry, you said a little bit. Sorry.
Yes, we seem to have bad Skype audio problems, so I'm going to repeat it. And if you can't hear it, I'm going to move on to Omar.
Okay.
So do we have? How do you recognize when you're in fight or flight mode?
Yes. So there's going to be a couple of things. So you can be in hypoarousal or hyperarousal. The hypoarousal is that low grade, that depression, that fatigue, and all that stuff. The hyperarousal is the anxiety and the depression and the panic symptoms. So that's hyper. And hypo is low, and the hyper is the fight or flight and the anxiety and the panic. So the first thing you want to do is not judge yourself. You are, as Dr. Jessica Clemens would tell us, renowned psychiatrist, you are not your thoughts. So first, you do not want to judge yourself.
Yep.
You want to stop. You want to pause. You want to breathe, meditate, and do the opposite of what that depression is telling you. I don't want to take a shower. I don't want to brush my teeth. I don't want to take care of myself. You do the opposite.
To get
That
out of that.
anxiety is going to want to sabotage you.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to face that presentation. I don't want to, I don't want to be around a lot of people. I don't want to get on a plane, whatever that. And then that's irrational anxiety. That's the bad kind, because the good anxiety is the anxiety that protects us, right?
Mm-hmm.
That anchors us. But that bad anxiety is what sabotages us. So what you want to do is remember, do not judge yourself. Breathe, stop, meditate, collect yourself. Don't judge yourself. Do the opposite of what that hypoarousal, fatigue, and depression is telling you.
Yep.
In the hyperarousal, come back from the panic, the anxiety, collect yourself, face your fears. If you get deadlocked, that's when it's time you gotta reach out to a mental health professional. You should already have, if you're having chronic anxiety and all that stuff and depression, you should already have a therapist and be seeking out a mental health professional. But if you find yourself deadlocked, I just can't get out of bed. You know what? I tried what Kyra said. I tried to do the opposite and I just can't push myself. I tried to bring myself back from that panic and I just couldn't. You got to seek help then. When yoga can't be your release and your guide and it's not helping you, that's when you have to seek outside help.
Yep, I want to pick up.
And they may actually incorporate yoga practices once you go to see the therapist or the psychiatrist.
I want to pick up something on what you said and actually give this to you, Omar. So she said do the opposite. So very often, and we're going to have to do this one quick because we're almost ready to go into the break. However, so when she said in yoga, if something comes up for anxiety and things like that, you do the opposite. So in mediation, when you have so many people who are kind of like butting heads and they're really kind of locking their heads together, would you sometimes advise your clients to just do the opposite of what they just think they should be doing?
So for conflict resolution, first it's important to understand why the conflict is happening. So mediation basically says that emotions and values are interconnected. And what are values? Simple, they are whatever is important to you. It could be good communication.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to pick this right up when we come back. We are ready to go into the break and we continue to talk about how we can move forward with mediation and what kind of the first starting points are. Stay with us.
Because of you, I felt hopeless.
Because you said rude things about my work, I started to question my own voice.
I know it was a joke, but it still hurt me.
Because of your negative comments online, I've almost quit doing the one thing that makes me happiest in life.
Because you shared something about me that was private, I felt embarrassed.
Because you said hi to me on the first day of school, I felt included and I knew that I was going to be okay.
Because of you sharing your story with me, I feel comfortable sharing my own.
Because you were there when I was coming out, you helped me regain my confidence.
I'm still here today because of you.
Listen, you're my friend.
I noticed you haven't really been yourself recently.
Yeah, I feel like something's up.
How are you?
Are you okay?
Is there anything you want to talk about?
I just want to know how you're feeling.
And listen, even if you don't know what to say, I'm here to talk.
No matter what you're going through,
I just want you to know I'm here.
I've got your back.
when you want to talk, I'm here.
Welcome back to Smart Sustainability. I'm Nicolette de Vidar. Thanks for joining us for this next half of the program. We ended up talking with Omar here on mediation, and my question was, if in yoga we're supposed to do, if we have an anxiety that comes up, we're supposed to do the opposite of what our normal instinct would tell us. My question to you was, Omar, so in mediation, when people lock their heads, they have their pretty set mindset usually when they go in, do you sometimes advise your clients to do the opposite?
As I was saying, first, it's important to understand why conflict happens. Mediation basically says that emotions and values are interconnected. And what are values? Simple. They are whatever is important to you. It could be good customer service, good communication, shared responsibility, trust, honesty, respect. Again, values are whatever is important to you. So unmet values are going to lead to said emotion. For example, if you walk into a store and you don't get good customer service, that might lead to an emotion of anger.
But that depends on the mood.
Correct. So, with emotions and values, which are interconnected, it's important to have those values met to resolve the conflict.
So what do you do when you have clients that I suspect many of them sometimes are not aware of their underlying values or motivation? So they may think they have some sort of values and emotions that's present, but very often when you dig deeper, what if they lie at themselves and they're not, and not knowingly lying at themselves, but if they mistake some of their underlying values for something that's just not there?
So that is where the mediator comes in. So at the mediation table, if you have two people who are in conflict, let's say that good communication is something that's important to them both. Maybe these are two people in a relationship. So you would ask, let's say the lady, we can call her Susan. Okay, so what's going on today? And she would go on to explain what's going on. Like, oh, he never calls me. He doesn't even communicate nearly good enough. Never tells me where he's going. Okay, so I, as the mediator, would say, okay, so it sounds like good communication is something that's important to you, something that you value. Is that correct? So it's the mediator's job, so to speak, to unearth those values.
So you probe for the values and you unearth those values and point out what's really important for both of the parties.
Correct. Mediators just help people realize what's important to both of them. Let's say the man, we can call him John. And John says that, well, good communication is something that's important to him too. So what's the problem? The problem is, perhaps, they never discussed what good communication looks like.
Or means to both of them, because I'm pretty sure they have a very different understanding of what good communication is.
Correct. Two people can have two different ideas of what something is, and that is part of the conflict. So it's the mediator's job to unearth those values. I also think it's important for people to know that there is no such thing as a negative emotion. A lot of times...
Did you hear that? There is no such thing as a negative emotion.
Correct. I've heard people say there are positive emotions and negative emotions. Positive emotions like joy and happiness, or negative emotions like anger and sadness. Again, there's no such thing as a negative emotion, maybe uncomfortable. Those negative emotions are simply the warning signs or red flags that tell you your values aren't being met. Just think about it. If you were driving and you saw a stop sign or a warning sign that said cliff up ahead, you wouldn't hit the accelerator, would you? No, you wouldn't. So just like we pay attention to those physical warning signs while driving, we need to pay attention to our internal warning signs as well. Again, those internal warning signs are the red flags that tell you your values aren't being met. And unmet values lead to conflict.
So in other words, taking your example, let's say someone gets angry and the first reaction is, well, I shouldn't really be angry, I should be able to control the emotions. But according to what you said, the question should be, why am I getting angry?
Correct. Again, why are you getting angry?
Right.
What's making you angry? What value isn't being met? Good example. I once had a job I was unsatisfied with. If somebody asked me why, I would tell them that I wasn't making enough money. And
Was that the truth?
That is the truth.
Okay.
And I would tell them that I never had enough time to myself. A mediator would say, okay, so financial stability is something that's important to you. Is that correct? And I might say yes. The mediator is going to ask, is that correct? Because they are not going to put words in another person's mouth. The mediator might go on to say, you said that you never had enough time to yourself. So that means that work-personal life balance is something that's important to you, something that you value. Is that correct? And I might say yes.
So going back a little bit on this one, it seems so that the mediator, there's a much broader application for this type of conflict resolution. And what I'm getting with this is that going forward, we live at a time, as we spoke very often, that you're confronting with yourself. You can't run away anymore. There are just a lot of things that just bubble up to the surface. More and more people will come to the recognition, very likely, that I have different values, or maybe my values have changed and I need some conflict resolution, I need to get to another point. So if you have an issue right now with your partner or with the kids or with your landlord or whatsoever, it's really going the conflict resolution route really goes to a much more deeper inner level.
Correct.
In figuring out who is the person and what's really important. Not just what you think is important, but what's actually deep down.
Correct.
And bring it together.
Correct.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was going to ask Kyra a question, but you see, there she is back. There we go. So, with your clients that you have right now, what do you experience? Is there like a common thread of your clients of traumatic experiences that they share? We still have technical difficulties. Can you hear me now?
I hear you.
Can you hear me? No, she can't. She cannot hear us.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great. So is there
one more time?
Is there a common thread among your clients that you're working with and some of the experiences and some of the emotional states that they share? I know you mentioned panic attacks, for example, and anxiety. So is the bulk of your clients dealing with anxiety or panic attacks?
I have clients dealing with addiction, lack of confidence. It's a range of things that my clients are dealing with.
Now, you said it's mainly for people of color. From your experience, is there a difference in how some of these symptoms are expressing themselves in African Americans or people of color versus other nationalities or races?
So that's why it's important for me to have a yoga collective in a community, because a lot of times people of color feel supported when they have mental health issues. Again, just not feeling included in a journey. So I think that a lot of times they think that their problems and their emotional and mental health issues are muted. So again, that's why it's so important to create communities like mine, these yoga collectives and soulful retreat collectives and all these kind of things that say you are part of self-care. You should also be free as a person of color. You should also into self-care. So I do think it's a disparity there, yes.
There is, okay. So when you said you feel that they are muted, does that mean they are muted in terms of not admitting these things to themselves or not speaking up about it in the same manner?
Yeah, I think it's stigma related. I think it's stigma related. For example, a lot of Black men not feeling comfortable being vulnerable about mental health issues, and because Black women are taught to be so strong. Black men are constantly taught strength. So they get afraid to show that vulnerability on a day-to-day basis. So movements like self-care and my yoga collective are saying, let your guard down, be real, admit that you need help, admit that you need soothing and healing.
Yeah, because as we said, the 21st century is about getting real, and it's time that we all get real with who we really are and confront with who we are and just and own it and live up to it.
Yes, because there begins the journey of resetting.
Yeah.
Reset so you can prosper by admitting, here is where I really am. Not where I want, not where I wish I was. Here is where I am really, mentally and emotionally. Let's start from here.
So there is a big moment of truth. You really come to grips with your own truth of who you are, and this is where you start. And there is no sugarcoating, there is no running away. It's just no judgmental. It's just coming to say, this is where I am right now.
Yes.
And this is where my journey starts.
Yes, because your yoga journey is going to bring you face to face. It's going to be all the reality you need. Your body, your mind, your heart, and all of that is going to bring everything. I am here to guide you. I'm here to help guide those emotions as you take your yoga journey. Now, and help give them meaning. Well, you define that. I help you to interpret those things.
Yeah. Now, is this fairly even out, male and female, or is this more female? So from my experience, it's usually more female that start with yoga, but I do know there are some males that go that route too.
Yeah, we start to see a lot of Black male practitioners. I mean, some that are out there featured in Essence magazine and start their own businesses, collectives. So yeah, they are telling men, let's go, be a part of this. Yeah. Don't be afraid, let go of the fear.
Yeah. Now, I want to come back to your name because the Collective Yoga Reset. Explain to us the reset part.
Oh, yeah. So being a person that has dealt with trauma myself, and I know that there's this journey you get lost in of the anxiety, the depression, the panic, the feeling lonely, the feeling isolated. So when I finally decided to reset, my life just completely changed. Like I was attracting all these blessings in my professional career, in relationships, in my home, just all that because of the mentality shift. I stepped out of the wallowing, and I reset so that I could prosper. So it's all about saying, you know what, I've been through this trauma, but it's time to come out of that darkness and into the light, and let's reset, let's prosper.
But you can't.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, but you can't really kind of step out and forget about this. And I think we have to make this clear for our viewers because you can't run away. So you need to confront it.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
It's about saying I'm not going to stay in this dark place. I'm not going to stay in the past. I'm going to come to the present, reset, so I can prosper. I am allowing. Good point. I am allowing my past to empower me. I am now turning that pain into power. I am letting that show that I am resilient, I am strong, and that nobody can define me by my trauma. I'm going to keep stepping.
To go
in
forward.
A community like Reset Yoga Collective, we take those steps together. Here's a community where we're going to take those steps together. I'm going to be there to grab your hand and take those baby steps, and then the big steps, and then the jog, and then the run with you.
Now, when we spoke earlier, I've heard some people say that the hardest part of this whole journey is, or a traumatic experience in general, is that it changes your life, and it's the hardest part is coming to grips with that your life changes, although you want to run away from it, or you have an initial inclination to run away from it. So is when people come to you and start the yoga, is this already when they came to recognize and say, my life has already changed and I need to move forward? Or is this when they say, yeah, I'm still a little bit on the verge and I need to do something about that?
Oh no, I have clients that are still deep to it, dealing with addiction and all kinds of different things. They're still right in the center of it. But I see these powerful moments, like for example, when I saw my client in deep meditation and I was Ujjayi breathing with her, the breath of sound, and allowing her to move her hands and touch her body and connect. And I only intended for her to do that for a few seconds, but she got so into it, she didn't stop for like 5-10 minutes as she laid in her savasana. She kept going. And that beautiful moments like that, you see that she's connecting to her body and starting to accept herself more. And that's the kind of stuff that means so much to me when I see somebody coming back to the light.
Yep. So Omar, coming back to you, do you know when people are ready for mediation? I mean, can you tell usually?
Yes, but first, I think it's important to mention one thing. I heard Kyra talk about truth and vulnerability. When people come to the mediation table, it does take a lot of vulnerability for those people to have their conflict unearthed, so to speak. At the mediation table, you might hear someone mention that they were abused in the past. And then that adds to the conflict that is happening now. Mediators ensure that there is a safe place for people to be vulnerable, for people to be truthful with each other. Mediators will ensure that both people are being heard, because sometimes when you have conflict, you have power dynamics. Someone might have more knowledge than the other person. Maybe somebody's personality is more aggressive, which might shut the other person down. Mediators.
So you have the intimidation factor.
Correct. Mediators are there to make sure that both parties are heard. And again, they don't have to have their conflict be front and center inside of a courtroom. It all takes place behind closed doors.
So what are some of the biggest challenges in the process of mediation that you've run into?
So some of the biggest challenges is sometimes getting people to be truthful. Sometimes people will lie. Sometimes people are hesitant to allow themselves to be vulnerable.
Do you tell your clients that they should be, that they're all on the same page, so they should allow themselves being vulnerable?
Mediators let everyone know that when they come to the mediation table, this is a safe place for them to be vulnerable and to be truthful with each other. Because if they're not, the conflict isn't going to get resolved.
That makes sense. Now, I wanted to come back to you, Kyra, because we talked so much about trauma and trauma experiences, and you focus on that. Can you show us one or two poses as to what those could be that we could practice at home that can actually deal with trauma when it comes up?
Yes, yes. So one pose is the Virasana, the Thunderbolt pose. It's a seated position. It's a restorative pose. You're going to put your buttocks on your feet and sit in this seated position like so. And you're going to put your palms face down, and you're going to breathe in through your nose, through your mouth, the breath of sound, which is the Ujjayi breath. And this is a pre-meditation type of pose. You can let your breath go back to a normal cadence when you're ready, but it's important to release those Ujjayi breaths to just force all that anxiety out. Another pose is the Savasana. And this pose is difficult. This restorative pose is difficult because it's really hard for us to relax sometimes, and a lot of us don't want to relax. So you're going to lay out like so. And you're going to do that again. You're going to breathe in, Ujjayi breath, about 45 degrees here. And you can put your right hand over your heart, your left your stomach. Switch out very slowly. Everything is slow, nothing is fast here. And you can let your breath return back again to a normal cadence. Lying here in the stillness, calming your mind, calming your body. I recommend this, touching yourself. Normal cadence here. There's an energy right here. A calm that happens right here in your Savasana, in your corpse pose. And you can lie as long as you want in this restorative pose that allows you to reset.
Well, thank you very much for sharing. Now, this is all stuff also, these are all practices and exercises that people can do at home. So really, right now, there is no excuse why any of you shouldn't be able to deal with your anxiety or the stress levels that you experience. Actually, any of us, we all go through this. So I guess the biggest challenge on this one is just to really get yourself to a point of letting really go. And after watching this, I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like we could do it right here.
Yeah. Letting go. Letting go. Yes.
It's the letting go part, which then brings me.
It's the letting go part.
Yep. Which then brings me back to you also, Omar. At what point during the mediation can you actually tell when clients are ready to let go and really get to a point where they drop all their preconceived notions and mindsets and stubbornness and they're ready for solutions?
So I would say that moment comes when you see everyone just dropping their guard and allowing themselves to be vulnerable. They start bringing up, oh, what about that time in the past when you yelled at me? Oh, what about that time in the past when you pushed me? I've seen that in mediation. That is when you can tell.
Give us some more examples, because I want to get our preconception away from the fact that most people think about mediation as kind of a last resort before something goes to court. Because I really think we live in a time where it's so important to explore different conflict resolutions, particularly to problems that are completely new. Many of us are running into problems that we haven't faced before. So can you give us some more examples of what are more conflicts that have been coming up recently? Can you give us an example of, for example, an interracial conflict?
Yes, certainly. So, for example, you might have somebody at work and then their boss says something that person might interpret as being racist, for example. Those two people can then come to the mediation table.
What are some of the challenges with that from your experience? Like, what are some of the real tough points in dealing with that?
So, if you have somebody who perhaps said something that one person interprets as racist, that person might be hesitant to admit that what they said is racist.
Well, because probably for them it might not have appeared as such.
Correct.
It's a perception level, right?
Correct. So you might ask the person who felt like the remark was racist, okay, can you help me understand in your own words what a racist comment looks like for you? And then that person would describe that.
Could you see this in a larger context? So for example, more on community levels, could you see something that we could actually go more into a conversation like this or a dialogue like this in a larger group setting?
Correct. So you have mediators, such as myself, that are trained to do large group facilitations or dialogue, such as between the police and the community. So mediation is definitely applicable to large group dialogues.
Speaking of police, classic example right now, how would something like this look like in the context of all the social problems we're having right now? So you have the police force on the one side, you have rioters on the other side. how could we envision something like this being mediated through a mediator?
So, I would say that getting the police officials and the community together to have a large dialogue. It could be inside of a center, inside of a church.
So like a town hall meeting?
Correct, like a town hall meeting, and then have the mediator facilitate that dialogue. And again, the process is the same. The mediator is going to ask people open-ended questions. Somebody might say, justice is what I want. Justice is important to me. Police says, well, justice is important to me too. I might say to the person within the community, so what's justice look like for you? And then a dialogue can proceed from there. Sometimes people have misunderstandings, misinterpretations, and miscommunication, and those are cleared up during mediation. It's also important to note that mediation does reduce recidivism, and that's a return to prison. So I believe that Community Mediation of Maryland is at the forefront of that effort. We spoke about conflict resolution moving forward in the future. Like I said, I envision more people using their community mediation centers or going to an independent mediator to resolve their conflicts instead of resorting to going to the courts. I also see that prison reentry mediation becoming huge in the future. It should be, because it does reduce recidivism.
It does, but why hasn't it been done more at this point with all the problems we're having?
So I have a lot of thoughts about that.
Well, you got to make it quick because we have about 40 seconds left, but go.
So I'll say that in terms of prison reentry mediation, it is very difficult to get into the prisons and for the prisons to allow that type of mediation to happen.
Why?
Sometimes, as people say, prison is a business, and they want to keep that business going.
Okay. So that's one of the reasons. What are some, well, we're actually at the end of the program, but I do want to explore this going forward in another program. Thank you so much to both of you on being on the program. And thank you so much for watching. I hope we've given you a little bit of insight of how a modern conflict resolution and healing within ourselves as well as society actually can look like. Thanks so much. Have a good night.